Managing a small team or business comes with a unique set of challenges. With limited resources and manpower, it's easy for things to feel chaotic and out of your control. How can you, as a leader, accomplish your goals while keeping your team engaged, effective, and accountable? This podcast will give you practical strategies you can implement now to lead your team or business to reach its fullest potential. Welcome to the Organizing Chaos podcast with your host, Danny Coleman.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Organizing Chaos, where we talk about small practical strategies for small teams and small businesses. And today I have Mr. Chris Weninegar, founder of Muletown Coffee, who, if you've been watching my videos, you can see I kind of sport some of their swag around here every so often. And we have him on the show today, and he's going to talk to us about, I don't know, what we're going to talk about, Chris.
That's a great question, Danny.
We'll get into it. But yeah, so tell us a little bit about how you came to found Muletown Coffee. What were you doing before then, and how did you start that?
Yeah, so I did a lot of stuff. When we started Muletown, I was living right down the street.
Very close to me.
You can almost see my house from here.
Yeah.
At 603 Fleming. The only people I knew in Columbia was my business partner, Matt.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm. I was working on a music project in Nashville while I was working at Royal Cup Coffee in Birmingham. Huh. So I was coming up to Nashville recording almost every weekend. And my wife was in grad school studying to be a nurse practitioner. And, okay. We were living in Birmingham. She really hated Birmingham at that time. That's how we moved here.
Okay.
So we moved right down the street. I took a job with another coffee company doing sales. Didn't really like it, but I never really liked working for anybody. Found out my wife was pregnant. My business partner's wife was also pregnant at the same time, Matt, or my soon-to-be business partner. And, so I don't know. It's just this kind of had this. I remember the night Matt and I had gotten some beers from Kroger right down here, and we were standing outside in the cold talking, and Matt was kind of freaking out because his first child was about to be on the way, and I had just found out that my wife was pregnant. And we started tossing around ideas. We just knew that we wanted to do something. Our lives were about to change forever, and I guess for me, I just wanted to have a little more control over that than I had had.
What do you think the motivation was? Was it lack of happiness with where you were at, or just you felt like...
That's, the motivation, I think, was... I think kids being on the way is a great motivator.
That's true.
So I think there was financial... I want to do something that allows us to not have to worry about money all the time. But I think if I can remember correctly, which I've got the picture so clear in my head, but I remember like wanting my kid. When you first have kids, it's all very romantic. I remember my kid wanting to be proud of his father, her father, whatever it was going to be. I didn't know at that time.
Okay.
Obviously, I wanted a boy.
Oh.
No offense to the ladies listening, but most men want boys. And so I wanted them to be proud. I had this picture in my head of having something of my own to where I could, the thought was a coffee shop, so where my kids could stand up on a milk crate and learn how to ring people up and it was just this really...
It's very Norman Rockwell.
Yeah, it was very much like a very romantic picture of small business, and at that time I didn't really even... I still don't know how to spell the word entrepreneur, I don't think, but...
I always have to Google it.
Yeah, Google search it. But at that time it was just more about just kind of being in control of our lives and being able to spent that. My parents were great parents. My parents were divorced, but my dad, great dad, just worked all the time. Just the 40-hour week, 50-hour week company man.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to be able to pick up and be really involved in my kids' lives. And very romantic thoughts. That was the motivation. That was the sort of drive.
So why coffee?
Yeah. So my first job when I was my very first job was when I was 14, which we have a mutual friend, Caleb, that works at Chick-fil-A.
Oh, yeah.
We worked for the same guy.
I didn't realize
when
that.
I was 14, a guy named Randy, who was the whatever they call him, the operator at Chick-fil-A in Oxford, Alabama. And then there was a girl that I liked when I was 14 years old that worked at this little bagel shop, and they had a coffee bar, and so I applied for a job there, and then I played music for the rest of my life. And coffee shops were always good at letting you off for 3 months at a time, so you could go on tour or whatever, or so you could just stay at home and do nothing. And
make art.
So I worked at Starbucks for a lot of years. I worked at Rivertown Coffee, which was our first customer at Muletown, while I was in school at UNA. And I just always loved the coffee culture. The sort of story recently I've been writing, just trying to better understand some of the questions that you're asking. Like, why did I do this? You know, what was the motivation? A lot of the questions that you're asking. And I think the reason, the thing you uncover in your subconscious or whatever, is I have this memory of my mom shortly after my parents were divorced when I was maybe 10. And there's a coffee shop in Birmingham called O. Henry's Coffee. And they were the first, they've been roasting coffee and had a coffee shop, like way before it was cool, to be a coffee roaster. And like it was something they didn't really even talk about. It was just, and my mom loved this place. And she took me there one time, and I was just a kid, so I ordered hot chocolate. Yeah. And there was like this butternut hot chocolate that I loved, or something that they had there. Just tear the packet open, nothing fancy about it. And I'm sitting across from her with my legs dangling from the chair, and my mom, who had just the way I wrote it was the weight of two worlds on her shoulders. She's a single mom. She's working 2 jobs. She's got 3 kids. She had a really rough childhood, and just the world was coming down. But when I was sitting across from her in this chair at the table, and I remember this even though I must have been 10, like just really peaceful place for her. It seemed like she was at total rest. And so I think the more I've discovered that, the more I like creating that kind of situation for people. And I've always loved people, being around people. Yeah. And the coffee business, in short, is if you own a coffee shop, your job is, your work is everybody else's break. So you're just hanging out with people most of the time. So it was the most non-work of all the work I've done in my life, I guess.
Creating it, or
no. Always working at a coffee shop.
Oh, I get what you're saying.
So it's just like you just hung out with people and made drinks. It's like, this is great. That was before I knew that actually owning a coffee shop was a very different situation.
Yeah, so that's perfect. So kind of talk a little bit about some of the struggles of getting it going, kind of taking it off 2 guys and kind of getting bigger than that.
Yeah, well, the first struggle was, Matt and I, just the decision, I guess. The conversation that I'm talking about with Matt and I remember we had all these ideas, things we could do. Do we make a record? Do we do this? Do we do that? And it's something just clicked in my brain, call it God's providence or inspiration or whatever you want to call it. That it was just like this knowledge that I just had to pick something and do it. And which is very profound now. At the time, it was just like a inkling, just an idea. And so the biggest challenge first was just deciding that this is what I'm doing. And then from there, I'm pretty sure my checking account was overdrawn probably. It usually was at that time. So the first big hurdle was financial. How do you get something? We are a truly bootstrapped company.
And this is before you guys had a cafe. You were just
we had
wholesaling
nothing
at this point?
No, we weren't even wholesaling. This is the very, very beginning.
Gotcha.
I remember Matt and I walking across Riverside Bridge here, and I'd sort of done the math of what the equipment costs and everything else, and I just remember showing him that number and going how do people do this? Like, where do you get this money from? But we just started making another profound thing, just sort of a hunch. We just started making steps. I just said we're going to make steps. So the first challenge for me was finding the time. So I quit my job at the sales job that after asking my wife if I could do it, of course. Quit my job.
And she okayed you quitting your job?
Yeah,
while
you
she
know,
was
in
pregnant?
hindsight, she's
Wow, what a keeper.
She's crazy.
Yeah.
She's absolutely nuts. But I got on the horn and I found a job disconnecting illegally hooked up cable, which I think I actually disconnected your cable.
Oh, really? Well, it wouldn't be mine.
Well, you know.
I don't
whatever.
use cable. I'm a millennial.
But so, yeah, the figuring out the money piece was one of the big challenges. I mean, you know, I could go all day on this. So you just guide me as you will. But and you may know the story about that. Like the profound idea that I had that I think is huge, and I tell everybody now was just take a step towards it. Just one step toward whatever that next step is. Just
so
take
your
that
minimum
next
viable
step.
product, is that kind of what you're hitting on here? Sort of like that?
Well, yeah, that was before I knew that terminology.
Before you knew the terminology, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess, like, you know, in my mind, it was our minimum viable product was, I remember this, we'll find a roaster and we'll start roasting coffee. You need coffee. Our minimum viable product was a coffee roaster and green coffee. And so, yeah, that's what we were working on.
So how'd you make money the first time? What was the first sale,
buy
I guess, you got?
the roaster? The first sale was probably to my dad or mom.
Oh,
or
okay.
something, you know.
Selling him some coffee you roasted?
Yeah, so long story short, I took a job disconnecting illegally hooked up cables. And my first day out of training, I pull up at a house. Matt's in South Dakota on a riding retreat. I pull up at this house, and this guy left his garage door open, and inside the garage, one of the houses on my list to check was a coffee roaster, an espresso machine, a coffee, and this stuff happens not just to me. Like, as I've talked to several other people, like, just this magic of just taking a step in that direction. Like, if I wouldn't have done that, I would have never even pulled up in that neighborhood. That's crazy. You know, and so that's absolutely nuts. But I have more stories like this that we don't have time to talk about. But it just seems to be a natural law that if you start taking steps, like, you'll find your way.
Yeah.
So the minimum viable product, I guess, would be coffee roaster and coffee. We didn't have a plan. Our business plan was, I wrote about this recently too, was roast coffee and sell coffee.
Yeah. To
make money. I think Matt's goal was, if I can pay my rent, then I'm good. Yeah. Obviously, I had much bigger ambitions. Yeah. And so, we sold our first bag of coffee, probably to our mom or dad or ourselves or something. But then almost immediately, we were roasting out of this guy's garage. He let us borrow his equipment. And there would be nights where we're roasting, it's like pouring down rain, and we've got the garage door open, we're getting wet, you know?
Yeah.
And so almost immediately, I just always knew that it was going to be more. I had helped start a company in Birmingham called Seeds Coffee prior to this. And so I had already had a vision for that with Seeds, and now this was my opportunity to do it with Muletown. And I knew we needed a building. We needed to plant our flag in the ground. And at that time, there was nothing in Columbia. And I knew I could probably get one of these buildings downtown really cheap. And so the next step was find a building, which turned out the next step was convince Matt to sign a lease on a building. And so Matt and I found this building. It kind of freaked Matt out because it was moving too fast. But I made a deal with him. I said, like, what if I get a wholesale client that will pay our rent? He said, if you do that, we'll do it. I think 2 days later, I was at John Cartwright's place in Florence, Alabama, asking him for his coffee account, who to this day is one of our biggest customers. So
who is this, John Cartwright?
Rivertown Coffee.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
In Florence. So they were our very first customer. Probably 3 days after Matt said, if you do this, you know.
Yeah.
So we set up the thing, we got it, and within weeks we were tearing out walls and everything else and getting it built.
Wow. So when did things start to take off? Like when did you start to be like, okay, this is really viable?
Yeah, man, like almost immediately. And I heard a story one time about it's in one of the, I think it's in Good to Great maybe, or one of those books. One of the books that we all read.
Yeah.
It was about this, we'll just say a general. I don't know the story very well. I'm a high quick start, so I sort of
Skim through stories.
I get the gist of books.
And then go. Yeah.
And go. And but you know, he pulls up at this place for a battle, and they're all on ships. And then, do you know the story? And then as they pulled up at the island to fight the battle, the commander issued the soldiers with a charge to burn all the ships.
Oh yes, yeah, I know the story. Yeah.
And he said, we're either leaving here victorious or we're not leaving at all. And like that was sort of my mentality even from the very beginning. And this was before I remember that year starting my business, telling my wife that I wanted to read more. Now I read always, you know. And but so I never read any of this stuff. It was just sort of instincts kicking in, and but that was my mentality. It has to work because I had a kid on the way, so it really actually had to work.
Yeah.
And so I never considered failure as an option. But to answer your question, like it started taking off. It felt like immediately.
As soon as you got the building.
Yeah, as soon as we got the building, the building gave us more visibility.
Yeah.
So, you know, now it's a real place. So I think we started in like July. That's when we started roasting in the garage. December the 8th, we opened up the shop.
What year was this?
2013.
Okay.
It just so happened that we opened the night of the Christmas parade. And I think we did $1,800 that night, which is still like a pretty big day.
Yeah, it's still good. Yeah.
And it was me and my wife and Matt, and just everybody was working. It was a disaster. You know, I remember laying on the floor afterwards, just exhausted and whatever. But, you know, and then I think, so that was December, and I think by like March we were roasting for Annie Marshall Foods.
Okay.
And so right off the bat, we took off. And so from there, it was like, now we have 2 large accounts. So we're not diversified at all. And once again, I know nothing about business at this point, but I knew that was problematic.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think I had gone fly fishing with a guy that owned a company, and half of his customers were Amazon, or half of his business was with Amazon. And they were diversifying, and I just sort of picked that up. So it started picking up almost immediately, man. And I honestly, for the last 5 years, it's just felt like, for us, it's just felt like this is not everyone's experience, but for us, there was never that period of let's keep trying to get this to work.
Yeah.
It always just sort of worked. For us, it was more just like, okay, how do we get our head around this? Which, you know, your podcast, Organizing Chaos, you know, like that was it, you know, for us. It was just chaotic.
Yeah.
We had, to give you an example of that, when we first opened the store, I remember after that first night of sales, I had all this money, and I'm like, where do we put this? Like, we don't have a checking account. I don't even know. Yeah, like we never got permits pulled. We didn't know anything, you know. And so I went to go open up a checking account. Turns out I didn't have enough money to open up a checking account at that time. So I kept money in my sock drawer for like a couple of days until I had enough. You know, we didn't have a sign on the building. I mean, it was just we were always playing catch up.
Yeah.
So
how do you think you finally got ahead? When did it look like, or when did it turn? When you started hiring employees and stuff like that?
Yeah, man, get ahead. That sounds great.
Well, when you finally started to feel like you had a rhythm or a beat,
I think a little bit at a time.
Traction.
There were, so we've gone through stages, right? So, you know, if you're familiar with what you are, EOS, like they talk about hitting the ceiling. So there were times where it would be really smooth selling, and this was really great. So maybe the first time was probably like a year in. I remember we needed to do, like, our first day, like I said, was $1,800, and then it went down to like $150 days, and then like $150 days, and $150 days, and it was just like, man, I'm gonna be broke.
Yeah.
You know, this is a terrible idea. That didn't last long. Where it started turning around for me was when I hired Justin, our
Gervasi,
one of our roasters. And I made a deal with him. I said, look, for this thing to be sustainable, we need to be doing $500 days. We have to be. And so I made a deal with him. He wanted 40 hours a week. He was working at another fine establishment, coffee shop in Columbia, and we were sort of the renegade, new shop that's ruining everybody's life or whatever. But I made a deal with him. I was like, man, I don't know if I can give you 40 hours a week, but I'll make you this deal. If you stay here and run the shop for me, I'll try to go out and knock on doors and just round people up. And if I can get us to $500 a week, then we'll get it. And at that time, I was being encouraged by, it was the first time that I was getting like legitimate business advice from some people that I just randomly come across. I don't even know who it was. But they were telling me things like you got to get out from behind the counter and work on your business, not in your business, and all the like classic stuff. And they were just concepts at that time.
And how old was the business at this point?
Less than a year.
Okay.
Less than a year. So yeah, we've been running our business. We've been working on our business as long as we've been a business. So
that's pretty good. Usually it takes people like a year or two before they can get to that point.
Yeah. How quick start? I don't know. Well, I think that like when people told me, you need to be working on your business, it just like my brain sort of processes concepts pretty quickly, and it made sense to me. Like if I'm here, like cleaning out coffee pots, who's hiring people, who's doing interviews, who's doing that, who's doing this, who's going out and getting sales for the wholesale account.
That's huge. That really is huge, and it's not common for small business owners to think that sometimes ever, some even, but I mean definitely not early on. So I mean I think that's
I think too. I think it has perspective. For me, I knew I wanted something much bigger than just the one shop.
Yeah.
My father-in-law had given me a $6,000 loan to get started when we decided to move into the building, and you talk about motivation. It's like. There was this,
you don't want to owe your father-in-law.
I don't want to owe him, but I also would.
You already took his daughter.
It meant a lot to me that he did that, because like I said, my dad, great guy. Yeah, I couldn't even go and ask my dad. He's bailed me out so many times in my life.
Yeah, you've already used up all.
I've already used up all those. I'm not gonna ask him. And so the fact that this guy was just like, maybe I'll do this. It sort of made me want to make. Once again, my daughter. It turns out my daughter was born. About 2 weeks after we opened up our store. Wow. And so all that's really fresh, I'm not just running a business. My wife's working. So I have the baby at the shop, There was a lot of things going on. It was absolutely
You got those pictures then probably that you were kind of imagining having.
Yeah, man. I got that, If you were at my shop in the early days, then there's a good chance that you had to hold my baby while I made your drink. I still hear people say, yeah, I think I held your baby one time, like when y'all first opened. Because they would just pass it down the line while I made a lot of things.
So I want to hit on, if it's cool, if you didn't have anything else you want to add to that, I want to hit on the fact that so Muletown's become, and I'll say it for you if you won't, but like something of a phenomena for Columbia, Tennessee, and this area. Yeah. And my perspective is that it helped. I won't back up a bit. I think what's happening in America in general, maybe the world, but I'll talk about America, is that there's a return to craftsmanship. I was talking about this with Pete from Briarworks Pipes the other day, and there's a return to craftsmanship. People care about the story of things again. People need to feel connected to it, and I think that like we kind of went. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, when things got real big and large corporations, multinational corporations became a thing, we kind of got separated from how is this made, or what's the story behind this, or what does this mean, you know? And I think that there was a coming back to that. It kind of maybe started with like the hipster movement, maybe a little bit, like where it was like everyone was kind of looking for things that they didn't know, other people didn't know about. Yeah. And I think it was because they wanted to have more meaning to it, or they wanted to feel like they were closer to the story of something or whatever. And then the craft beer thing happens, and then like craft coffee shops really start to become more of a thing after Starbucks has become, ubiquitous. So in my mind, what you did with Muletown had something to do with, it was the right time to remind people of Muletown, which is Columbia's story. And that's what I see. But like, so what, from your perspective, why did you think Muletown resonate so much with this area?
Yeah, I don't know. All of what you said, I think was definitely a part of it. So I don't forget it. Simply put, I think what we did was we gave people a place to come together. I think that at the same time, people are returning to how things are made. But if you look, like when we were kids, maybe, like I was born in 83. When were you born?
88.
88. So, for my parents' generation, the goal was to get as far away from people as you could. Like, success meant we can move further out into the city. And you started seeing, like, in Birmingham, these Hoovers and these Pelhams and these out, where I grew up, just these suburbs. The suburb culture started.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So it went from small town to big city to, like, suburbs, right? And then there's really this revival towards, like, coming back together. Nashville's booming. All the big cities. All of a sudden, you start seeing urban lofts, and you start seeing all this stuff. And so I think that was a big part of it. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Like, I wish I had something to do with that. It was just dumb luck, I had no idea that Nashville was, having this huge growth boom or anything. It was just, for me, you got to understand from my perspective, I just saw it. And it was more like, man, what a shame. Like, this is a beautiful downtown area. What a shame.
Yeah.
I'd like to so I don't know if you know this, but where Asgard is now, I saw that building and I said, I want to put a coffee shop right there.
See, I walked by it and wanted to put a bar there, and then a bar went there.
Yeah, well, good. We almost had a coffee shop there, but it was going to cost too much to keep it from falling in on us. It was in really bad shape. And so, but yeah, I think, so we picked the name Muletown because I thought it was the coolest thing. I saw these old pictures from old mule days when we were looking for an apartment here.
Which, by the way, for those of you who aren't local Columbians, Mule Day is kind of one of our big celebrations around here because Columbia is the mule capital, or was the mule capital of the world. So
I like to think it still is. But I mean, nobody else is.
Yeah, no one else is claiming it. So we'll take it.
We'll take it. But yeah, there was something quirky about that and it's been going on for a couple hundred years, and I sort of, for a millennial, I'm way more of a traditionalist than most of my contemporaries. And I see something really beautiful in preserving things. So maybe that's why I wanted to be in downtown Columbia. Maybe that's, these are, like, once again, things you discover later. But I think that we really tried to focus on that maker thing at first, the craft thing, and, like, we just kind of suck at it, like
we in society in general, you mean?
No, Muletown.
Oh,
like, we just sort of sucked at it. Like, what Matt and I really cared about was just, like, in the way that, a couple guys sit down and have a glass of whiskey.
Yeah. We
really like the conversation. We really like the coming together. And, when I think about, it's really hard to answer the question, like, about, Muletown, you guys did so much for Columbia. It's like,
I'm sure you get it a lot.
Yeah, you get it a lot. And if we did, it's for this reason. It's because we gave Columbia a low barrier of entry into a place where they could think about what Columbia could be.
Well, that's a really good way of putting it. I remember, so I moved here in 2012.
Yeah.
And shortly, I was here for maybe a year. I moved to Franklin for a couple months. My housing situation there fell through. Moved back. And that was in 2013.
Yeah.
And that's when I first went into Muletown.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't there when I first went up to Franklin. And then it was there when I came back.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I immediately thought, this is cool. Something's happening. Like, this is different. So something's happening. And that was the first thing I thought. I remember it specifically. And then the customer service, people were real friendly. You had some young hip people behind the counter. And I was like, all right, these people are being nice to me. And this is we're connecting here. This is different than what I've been experiencing so far.
That's our niche, is being nice, actually.
For goodness sake.
Yeah. That's what we're good at, Our coffee's fantastic. Like, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I think our coffee is the best coffee that around.
I honestly, I don't really drink much else.
And we don't make a
point.
big deal about it at all. Like for us, it was just like you figure out the right way to do it,
right?
And you just do that.
And do
you
that.
know, it's not like there's not a guy in there going,
yeah,
like making sure that everything's just perfect or whatever. We actually sort of abhor that, but.
So then now you're at the point where we'll talk more about you as the owner. So you've moved into the owner's box for your company. Talk a little bit about what that looks like and how you got to that decision. Because I think a lot of owners never get to this realization that they don't have to work in their business. And as such, they there's a lot of things that can happen if they stay in it. For one thing, they can sometimes keep people from taking ownership because they're the owner, so they have obviously ultimate ownership. But when you move into the owner's box and you kind of let the operation go, you can kind of see that like you now have opportunities to do more creating.
Yeah.
So tell us about your story to get to that.
Yeah, I think maybe a good place to start is, probably for the last couple years, I've kind of felt. It went from being this exciting thing to kind of feeling like, am I a slave to Muletown? Like, do I have to be here all the time? Like, I'm from Alabama. I like the Crimson Tide. I like the state of Alabama, Maybe I want my kids to grow up in Alabama, Maybe I don't. Maybe I want them to grow up here. I don't know. But I remember wanting to make that decision. Like, I wanted to make that decision. And not feel like I'm just here because I have to be.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it started was, do I have to just do this like always? I love Muletown.
Yeah.
Really proud of it. Can't believe it happened, But so, as you know, and for those not listening, Muletown wouldn't be here without a guy named Matt Johnson. That's my business partner. We're against all legal advice. We are 50-50 partners in Muletown, and that for us Muletown has always been about doing something together. Yeah. And doing something that matters, or whatever. So I think, but having a partner can be just really, really hard. And we've just, I've broken whiskey glasses, we've just had some knockdown drag outs starting from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think it got to a point where it was sort of twofold. It was just, I can happily say that my business partner and I have a great relationship now.
Mm-hmm. It takes work though, just like any relationship, and a lot of people forget that.
It's a second marriage. It's
a lot of people treat their relationships in business like it has to be something different than regular relationships, but no, we're all humans, and so these relationships actually all work the same way.
Yeah, and it took him giving me an awful lot of grace, and I gave him an awful lot of grace, and I think we have a lot of the same values, so it made it easier. But
yeah, I think that's huge. Yeah.
As far as getting into the owner's box goes, is I think for me there's twofold. Like Matt is like a people person, Matt's the guy you want going into the wholesale clients and just giving people vibe. Like when I walk into a wholesale client, I'm like, what's wrong? What can we do better? Whoa. And Matt's just like, what's up, y'all?
Yeah.
Let's drink, or whatever it is, And so that's how we're different. But in business, for me, I'm a creator. Like I'm always creating, I'm always tweaking, I'm always making it better, I'm always doing this. And I think that our company needed a break. We just been busting it. We went from our first year, we did $100,000 in sales. In 5 years, we're doing $1 million in sales.
Wow.
Like we went from 4 wholesale customers to 100. We went from like 1 employee to 10 or something, and we're trying. We don't know anything about business, so we're trying systems, and we're doing this thing, and we finally found something that worked-ish for us, and it really helped me realize that what I'm really great at is ideas, coming up with new ideas. Our company, serendipitously, if that's the right way to say it.
Oh yes, I love it when someone uses
serendipitously. just happened to be at a place where the employees wanted a break, you know, which you can't do anything without them having steam,
Right.
you know, nothing. I'm sort of feeling like, am I a slave to this or whatever? And then it just through a lot of strategy sessions and thinking, and we sort of realized, like, man, this is a really great time for Muletown to just be what it is. Just be the one shop, grow the roasting business, just be. And that came through defining what we really wanted, which Matt asked me one night, what do you want? And I said, man, the reason I started this was I want a peaceful, quiet life, you know? I don't care anything about, I love creating stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like to start a whole bunch of businesses, you know? But only as much as I can get up in the morning, drink my coffee, read a book, you know.
Yeah.
You kind of do it on my terms. That's why we start businesses in the first place, right? And
That's
so
such a huge thing too. I almost want to point out that, like, a business is supposed to be a vehicle, and it's easy to forget that once you start it. And you're like, where was this vehicle supposed to take me?
oh yeah, the purpose, which is what I'm doing now, which we can talk about later, but is, you know, in every strategy session, it's like, what are you trying to achieve? And so it takes a long time in a business to get to that question. And I told Matt, I said, I don't want a peaceful, quiet life. He's like, so you don't want more money? I'm like, I'm good with the amount of money we're making. You don't really have anything to prove. I don't have anything to prove. And, you know, at one time we had thought, well, Matt will step out and I'll just run the business, you know. And then I think the more we talked about that, I should say this. When you have two owners both involved in the operations of a business, I'm not saying it can't work. I just think
very difficult.
It's very, very difficult. It causes a lot of confusion. You know, I don't know how many times there was a time that I went away on business or something, and one of our employees asked Matt something, and he gave them an answer that
It's mommy and daddy is what happens.
contradicted with They're
like, I go to him for this, and I go to them for this.
Yeah, and it causes a lot of resentment. You get mad. You don't really know what happened, and your mind wanders, and blah 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 blah. So it's just problematic. I would advise against it, if at all possible. I would actually, and we can talk about this if you want, but I would actually advise against partnerships unless they're necessary. You know, if you can do it without them, you should. You know, if you need, in my case, I needed the motivation, I needed the accountability, I needed someone to co-sign with me on loans. You know? I needed all that stuff. So yeah, we came to that point, and I had. So I had just gone to a friend of mine invited me to a monastery for 3 days of silence.
I heard about this. I interviewed Chris too.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
So what's funny is before my 3 days of silence at the monastery, I had to go to New York City.
Wow.
For 3 days.
For also 3 days?
Yeah, for 3 days.
3 days of one thing.
Opposite of silence.
Opposite, yeah.
It was just a very polarizing week. And Austin and I went up there and we were talking with some vendors that we were thinking about working with, and just kind of like seeing, you know, New York's awesome. It's got everything there. So getting some ideas, brainstorming about the future and blah, blah, blah. And then I go to the monastery, and it's sort of I think it's more of an Eastern thought, but there's this saying that silence is the loudest voice. And so, if you've never spent 3 days in silence, most people haven't.
I want to
you
try.
You totally
something.
should.
I'm very attracted to something like this.
I encourage everyone to go and spend 3 days in silence, because what it does.
Do you talk to yourself at all out loud?
Always, yeah. I mean, I always talk to myself.
When you're alone, do you say a word though?
Crazy.
Did you ever say any audible words?
No, I don't think so.
So no audible words.
You don't really want to.
I mean, yeah, obviously you're talking to yourself in your head, but I mean, like, no audible words for 3 days.
I mean, even if it's not 3 days, I would encourage you to go down the Steelhouse Hollow Falls.
I'm just wondering, like, did you stub your toe at any point and say, like, you know, or anything?
Yeah, no, nothing like that. Okay. I don't. Maybe I did. I don't know. I cuss a lot without noticing it. But there's a saying that silence is the loudest voice, and what happens is, to be quite honest with you, it was torturous for me.
Yeah.
I mean, just all my fears and everything, you know, just I'm having to deal with it, you know. And so it's really hard to explain unless you just do it. But imagine you're laying in bed at night, that time, if you're not watching TV, you're just laying in bed, and all of the stuff from the day. If you had a hard business decision or you had something, you're replaying it in your mind. It's everything. You got 3 days of that. And so it just really makes you think. And towards the end of it, I decided I was going to take, on my last day at the monastery, I decided I needed sabbatical. I was going to take 3 months off to sort of think. I'm a big believer in rest now. It's a really counterintuitive thing, but your business is not going to fall apart if you take some time off.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're running it, unless you're
Yeah,
like
then,
the
you
only
have to be there,
employee.
yeah.
Maybe it might, I don't know. But we were, luckily, because we've been working on it for a lot of years, we're in a position where we can do that. So I told Matt, I said, I need rest. I'd encourage you to take some. We both took 3 months off. I took 3 months off. Matt, I don't think, did.
Oh.
And so,
Wait, so for 3 months, both you guys were out?
yeah, Austin was
Oh.
running it.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
In theory, I don't actually know what happened. I wasn't there.
Well, it's still there.
Yeah.
So. Last I checked.
I don't know what the actual deal was, but I actually took 3 months off. And short answer is about probably 2 months in, I knew I wasn't coming back. I knew that we had developed some employees that really needed to either put up or shut up, I guess is the meanest way to say it. Like, they had learned everything they could learn about what they were doing,
and they needed to put it into practice.
They needed to go and put it in action and work and do it. I wasn't helping anyway. Like, there comes a point where you're not helping anymore. Where you've worked yourself out of a job.
Yeah.
And if you keep trying to create a job for yourself, you might just cause a lot of chaos.
Yeah.
And a lot of stress. And I think that's what I'd done. It became really simple. The decision we had made previously to me going to the monastery was, let's just be this for a while. Just being this is not what I do. And so, man, it was really hard for a couple weeks because you're sort of just handing over your baby and saying, just go with it. But it's been about, what month is it?
November now.
November now, right?
Yeah.
So I've been completely out for over a month now, a month and a half maybe. And to walk in my shop and just, either walk in the warehouse and see them having a meeting, or walk in the shop and seeing new merch that I didn't have anything to do with, and that's a great feeling.
The new mug's really good, by the way, with the Christmas tree.
Yeah,
on top.
I didn't know what that was.
That was really good.
That's actually a great point.
It was also easy to make too. You just put a tree on the last one.
Just put a tree on the last mug. Well, that's a good point though. It's fun. I actually talked to Austin, another one of our employees, right before I came over here, and I was telling him, I was like, "There's no way in hell that I would have designed that mug."
Yeah.
Or I would have said, "Yeah, let's do this." But when you're outside of your business, you're like, people are buying it.
Turns out people do things.
Without
you being around.
People just buy it.
Yeah.
I'm not the only decision that matters in the world.
Yeah.
So
that's a big thing. And so so as an owner, there's a degree of ego that becomes part of your business because it's you. It's a representation of you.
And I think it's essential.
Yeah.
But
how do you separate it? That's the difficult part.
Yeah.
How do you eventually, if your ego is part of the business, how do you then separate it to the point where you let other people, make decisions and stuff like that?
Well, so let's define this. Let's clear up this ego thing to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Sure.
Because
I guess for me, it's part of your identity. You're just so for me, my business, for instance, and even my logo is my face.
Yeah.
It's there it is. And so for me, until I grow my business to the point where I'm no longer having to be there all the time, it's going to be me. So, so my assistant, if they're not communicating with people the way that I would communicate with people, or if I have someone, scheduling an appointment in the end and they, fumble it or whatever, for me, it's that's me. That person's interaction with my business was not is not what I would like for them to have had interaction with.
Yeah, I put it this way.
So that's why it's me involved. That's what I mean when I say ego.
There's just no way of knowing how much my instincts got us where we are. There's really just no way of knowing. This is what's challenging about a partnership. If it's just you and you're making all the decisions, it either lives or dies, and your instincts were either right or wrong, the decisions you made. running a business is basically just making a bunch of decisions. I mean, that's all it is.
Yeah.
In reality. And so there's really no way of knowing how much of my instincts get. When I said, no, that mug's not good enough, or this mug is, you know, or no, that's too much coffee. Let's dial it back a little bit, or let's put a little more chocolate in that latte or whatever. You know, how much of that, even to where the way the chairs are lined out. Like, I've done everything to this point, like as far as all the thinking, where chairs go, where tables go, what stuff goes on the walls, whatever. So there's no way of knowing that, and that's the challenging part, because you're going, if I leave, like, how will, like, it's scary, you know? But I think of it this way. Imagine you're a baker, all right, and you make a chocolate cake, and you are very particular about this recipe. You've developed it, and, you know, it takes X amount of chocolate, X amount of salt, X amount of sugar, X amount of this, and that's your magic recipe. And people come in and they flood in the doors, you know, to get this cake, right? You still with me? Mm-hmm. Somewhere else, there's a bakery that also has a chocolate cake that has a different recipe, and there's still people flooding in the doors. And so I say that to say, like, you know, it's not just one recipe, you know?
Yeah.
Like, if I did something special and it got us to this point, that doesn't mean that Austin or Matt or anybody else is incapable of going there. And then also, some of the fun is just experiencing, if you have the courage to do it, which I find that to experience some of the best things in life, it takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, 100%.
And yeah, I could think on that for a while. But if you have the courage to step away, it's really fun just watching it be something you would have never done, you know, even in a month and a half.
But you can still enjoy it.
Oh man, you can enjoy it. Well, yeah, because they can't take, you know, I was the founder, whatever you're afraid of. Like, I'm never not going to be the founder of Muletown Coffee. Like, I had a bad business thing go south with Seeds Coffee. I'm an open book, so I don't pull any punches. I just tell it like it is. With this company in Birmingham called Seeds Coffee. And even though my picture's not on the wall, and, you know, it's like they don't, like, I'm not a part of their story anymore. I go in there to get coffee, and I'm like, it's Brett in, and they're like, oh, how do you know Brett? And I'm like, do I say I started this place? But they don't have to include me in the story, but they can't take that away from me, you know? And I think for us, you know, being, I don't know what the word is, just be confident enough to go, man, that's something I built. That's something I'm proud of, you know? Now it's time for somebody else to run it. What it's allowed me to do is it's allowed me, every day I do exactly what I want to do, you know? My stress level went from, like, whatever the highest is to whatever the lowest is.
Yeah.
Almost overnight. Like, it took about a week of going, oh, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I wake up in the morning, I cook breakfast for my kids. I really feel very honored to be able to live the life that I'm living now. So that makes it a lot easier too.
That's awesome. I mean, so this is, I mean, I could honestly go on forever, and I usually try to keep these to like 25 minutes or half an hour.
Oh, yeah.
But I intentionally didn't turn on the timer for this because I knew it was going to be a good one. Yeah. So I am going to wrap it up, though. Do you have any book or any tactic or any kind of something that you want to share with other entrepreneurs to kind of help them? You know, you've shared a lot, honestly. Like, some of the biggest stuff that I try to share with people, you've shared during this episode. Yeah. But anything else that you throw out there to tell people to, like, hey, go in this direction or anything like that? Any other entrepreneurs?
Absolutely, man. The most foundational thing, I mean, there's a ton of stuff, but the most foundational thing that's helped me get where I am is this random obscure paper by a guy named Shalom Schwartz, who is a professor at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, wrote something called the 10 Basic Human Values Theory. I can send you a link to it.
Yeah, please do.
Where he basically defines the 10, like, all the values that a person might have. He defines values to give you a little context as your brain's decision-making mechanism. It's your way of determining what's more important. Mm-hmm. You know, if that bottle over there is falling and, you know, a picture of your kid is falling at the same time, which one do you grab?
Gotcha.
And so in business, I ended up here because learning how important culture is in business, and I know that's something you're passionate about, and this need to define what your culture is through some values. And I think that I would challenge business owners, don't survey your employees to figure out what your values are. Don't do that. You have values. You're making the decisions. That company has your name on it in some shape, form, or fashion. And so what he does in this paper is it kind of helps you understand, like, these are the things you value in life, which is really important because of what we said about in your business. You gotta know what the objective is.
Yeah.
And essentially everybody wants the same thing, happiness, whatever that looks like.
Right.
Is it freedom? Is it money? Is it whatever it is? But unfortunately, that discovery is sort of at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that self-actualization thing.
Yeah.
But I would encourage everyone to read that paper and really discover what are the top 3 things you value. And the reason why it's so important is then you have to ask yourself, is the thing I'm building moving me towards that? Is it moving me? If it's, for me, mine were adventure, simplicity, and there's 5 of them, so I'm trying to give you my top 3. Adventure, simplicity, and building things that last. And so it wasn't managing things that last. It was building things that last.
Yeah.
I like creating stuff, making stuff. I like simplicity. I don't like a lot of complicated stuff. And I like adventure. I like being able to do new things. I like being able to discover. And so being involved in being an owner of Muletown really, in the role that I'm in right now, aligns really well with where I want to be in life. Staying in that role, continuing to just hack away at whatever I was doing, didn't. And it ultimately helped me make the decision. So it's kind of, in a shorter way, it's sort of discovering what your ultimate purpose is. What is the chief end of you? What are you trying to get to? And the better you can understand that, the better you can create the tool, which is your business, I think, to get you there. So without it, you're just running around.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's they're aimless, and that's everything. Whenever if I my consulting clients, like, the first thing I start with is like, what does a great day look like to you? What's a great way to spend your time? What do you?
I've done that exercise with you.
That's right.
It was really hard because I didn't know my value. I didn't know what I valued.
Yeah.
And I have to say this, and the reason why, even though we're running along on time, is like, started with just an honest conversation I had with my wife about, like, what do you want in life, which is, my curiosity has led me to asking lots and lots. I've talked to 50 entrepreneurs probably in the last 3 months, and I asked them, like, what are your values? What are you trying to get out of life? And nobody, like, very few people have an answer. They really don't know. Like, we say things like, I want to run my own business. Yeah, but why?
Yeah.
Why do you want to run your own business? And so, like, if you're ever doing your perfect day exercise, like, I would love to see. I wish you would create a database of all these different ones.
All the different answers. They're all pretty personal.
But I bet they're very, very.
But there's a lot of there are a lot of common.
I just want to do whatever I want to do.
Yeah.
Well, what do you want to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like I heard a quote recently that says we're really bad at knowing what we want, and I think that's very true. So it just takes.
Well, it's a hard question to ask yourself.
It's a very hard question,
and not everybody wants to put the work in.
And you got to put the work in, and it's. But I think it's the most important work you can do. If you figure that out, then you can start crafting your business, figuring out. I think you may have told me this. If nothing's important, everything's important.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, when you're running a business, any metric you've ever heard, you feel like you have to track it now.
Yeah.
And it's like, really, if your metric is, I want to make X amount of profit, if your value is lots of money, then only thing you need to care about is money.
Yeah.
Money, man.
Yeah.
Just profit. Just how many profit dollars are you making? Who cares about everything else, Anyway.
Yeah, now fame, fortune, or freedom. That was what I think John Meese told me about that one.
That's
and I like that. It's easy to remember because it's 3 words.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, for me it's freedom, and I think for a lot of people it's actually freedom. Fame and fortune, I think, are actually there's less people who do it for fame and fortune, and more people I think do it for freedom.
Yeah.
But that's conjecture. But
Sure.
I'm going to have you on the show again sometime. I feel like we could do this a lot. Just talk about
Yeah.
business philosophy and the way that it all ties in with just who you are as a person and stuff like that, and how it manifests and what you create and stuff. So thank you so much for being on the show. I wanted to have you on the show for a long time, but I wanted to kind of like work my way up, So thank you so much for being on the show.
It's a pleasure.
Appreciate it. And hey, everyone who is listening, thank you so much for listening to this longer than normal podcast. I have no idea how long it was, but for me, it seemed like it went by in a flash. Hopefully you enjoyed it too. Chris shared a lot of great stuff with us. If you have any questions or you would like to be on the podcast, if you want to sit in the blue chair and be interviewed, I would love to have you if you have something that you want to share with small business audience. Otherwise, if there's a topic you'd like to see hashed out on the podcast, shoot me an email, danny@dannycoleman.me. You can follow me on Instagram @IamDannyColeman. Hope you all are doing well, and we will see you later. Thanks.
Want more? Go to DannyColeman.me to download Danny's free small business hiring guide, which includes tips, templates, and tools, plus a step-by-step process you can use to find and keep high-quality employees for your small team or business.